We've been in existence since 1788. We've always been regarded as a shared space, as somewhere where people can come and have difficult conversations. Politically, we show no allegiance. We, in fact, would say we have something in our collections to offend everyone.
That was the voice of Julie Andrews, director of one of Belfast's oldest cultural institutions, the Linenopolis Library. And I'm Martin Nutty.
And I'm John Lee. Welcome to the third stop on our Irish Stew Gets Lost in Belfast series, recorded at the Linenopolis Library, which since 1788 has been opening minds in the city and beyond, promoting the pursuit of knowledge and preserving their world-renowned collections for you. And we thank Tourism Ireland for their support of our Belfast road trip and all their great efforts to promote the island of Ireland as a compelling holiday, vacation, and business events destination.
Hi, everybody. This is Martin Nutty, and welcome to another episode of Irish Stew. And we are sitting in a wonderful 18th century building in Belfast. The building is called the Linenopolis Library, or maybe I should say the institution is called the Linenopolis Library, and it dates back to 1788. And I'm delighted to be joined here, along with my co-host John Lee and Julie Andrews, who is the director of the Linenopolis Library. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Martin.
Julie, let's start off the discussion. You see me pull out this book, Belfast by Fergal Cochrane, which
yes.
I read, Martin was reading. And he has a nice section on the Linenopolis. And I was struck by a quote here. Maybe you could respond to her, tell us why you think, maybe why you would agree. For my money, one of the most significant civic institutions that has ever existed in Belfast is the Linenopolis.
I think it's very fair to say that about the Linenopolis. We've been in existence, as you said, from 1788. We've always been regarded as a shared space, as somewhere where people can come and have difficult conversations. Politically, we show no allegiance. We, in fact, would say we have something in our collections to offend everyone. So there's no favour shown, which I think is quite important. We're very inclusive. Our archives demonstrate that, between literary, political, historical, and Fergal actually launched that book in the Linenopolis.
Oh, okay.
Which has delivered a few lectures in here, because he has a great fondness for the place. Seamus Heaney was one of our honorary members, and he also said that no other organisation in Northern Ireland had done more to promote peace and inclusivity amongst our citizens.
Well, maybe, for our listeners who aren't familiar, just what is it? What is the Linenopolis? Where are we in Belfast?
The Linenopolis, we are located in an old Victorian warehouse. We originally sat in the City Hall in Belfast, or what was the site that the City Hall now stands on. So we're right in central Belfast, as central in Belfast as you can be, actually. Which I think is really useful for people also, because we're in the city centre. There's no area or subject that's off bounds in the Linenopolis, and we go out of our way to ensure that our archives, so our political collection dates back to just 1968, but the first leaflet was collected by the then librarian and realised that something seismic was happening in Northern Ireland, and it was very important. That collection's now 350,000 items, approximately. It includes political posters, pamphlets, periodicals, books, of course, printed material. However, it also includes artefacts, food, which is quite difficult for a library to conserve. So if you want jam or lollipops with political slogans on them, we have them. We've got badges and flags to represent all shades of political opinion. So that collection just gives you an example of how an organisation collected contemporaneously during a period of conflict, but yet kept its independence, and meant that it established trust with people from all communities and all walks of life. So that's one of our modern collections. Equally, when you go back to our long associations with the United Irishmen. Our second librarian was actually arrested and hanged for treason because of his political affiliations at that time. However, it's important to say that when the Linden Hall was established, its formal and legal name is the Belfast Society. It was the Belfast Society for Promoting Knowledge, and then became the Belfast Library and Society for Promoting Knowledge. And it was formed by the tradesmen of Belfast, and the gunsmith. Is my favourite one, because I just can't imagine how a board meeting would have evolved. I don't agree with you, bring out the gun, but it wasn't by the great and good. It was the tradesmen of Belfast who realised they wanted to spread literacy, education and learning. So I'm always very proud of saying we were formed between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, in between the two, which it's quite frightening when you think about it, or absolutely fantastic that we were formed during that time. And we're still around.
Just boomerang back to your 1968 collection, which begins. It's extraordinary foresight that somebody decided to start gathering that at that point.
Absolutely. A eureka moment in world librarianships, probably.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder, was there any pushback institutionally, or do you have any sense of that at this, from this distance? It's 50 years ago, right?
No, we didn't, as far as I'm aware. There was no pushback. I think it was accepted that the Linden Hall was an independent library, therefore it could collect where others couldn't. And in fact, I believe that during the 70s, material was collected in here that could even have been thought of as seditious at that time. But no favour was given at all. And we didn't, as far as I'm aware, we didn't get any pushback. And now, as I think I mentioned there at the beginning, all political parties across all political persuasions, all are very supportive of the Linden Hall and appreciate the fact that anything we do not take a political position on it. Even if anyone would have a perceived political bias themselves outside of work, we certainly don't know about it inside the library, because we keep ourselves completely and utterly as information providers and educators. So it gives the opportunity, for example, you mentioned, I know I've talked about that collection, but if we bring in community groups or school groups, they might see information and, dare I use the word, propaganda that they've never seen in their lives before. So it gives them an opportunity to experience that and have information. So I see that as an opportunity for difficult discussion and difficult debate, but not taking a political position on it.
Yeah, so I'm interested, you said you're an independent library, and I guess that goes to the nature of the institution, because it differs from public libraries, which are government financed. So can you explain a little bit about that? How do you keep the doors open in a place like this in an era when people aren't reading quite as much or quite as frequently, and with the online world, etc.? So
I think there's 2 points to the question you've just made. I think the nature of our archives, although we do digitise things and we do projects around digitisation to make items in our collections available to a worldwide audience, we see that as the shop window for what people can come in and delve into in the archives in here. So we see that as an opportunity. We're not a typical library, as you pointed out, so therefore you're not going to be able to pick up our books in Kindle too easily or online as easily. So it gives you an opportunity to have a shop window. You're saying about keeping the doors open in this world with difficulty. I think there's not as big of a history of philanthropy in Northern Ireland as what there would be in the US. So I think that's fair. So we are a registered charity. We own the building we're in, so it gives us a little bit of commercial rent from the shop units below us. And we do get a small amount of government funding, but it's very much discretionary and it's not expected. It's something we're glad to get. We have membership who do pay us membership, and we are trying to do that both physically and remotely and online access, just launching some new items that we're doing. But it's difficult. It is difficult at the moment to try and balance all of these things with a 236-year-old history, because I believe we're so important, obviously, as I'm the director, and I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't really believe in it. But it's something that we always have to think about, is how we manage the finances, what new and creative things we can do. Amongst the collection, sometimes we do projects where, for example, if you look at the political collection, we might do a project where we're looking at artistic responses to that. So we might try and bring in funding that way, where we're engaging with local communities and getting them to do their responses to particular items or archives. But I'm just talking about the political. Another interesting, or two other interesting collections we have in the library are Irish language collections and Ulster Scotsman's, which tie quite nicely to the heritage you were talking about as well. So, for example, yesterday, or throughout the year, but yesterday was the launch in Belfast, we have a lexicon which was written by Robert Shipboy McAdam, who was a Presbyterian and Irish language enthusiast who travelled the world. His family had the Soho Foundry in Townsend Street here in Belfast, but he wrote a lexicon. And in that lexicon, he started off with Irish as the head words, but he spoke 28 languages, which I find incredible, especially in the 1800s. And he translated them in almost like a business ledger, and he translated the words across all of them. So what we did earlier this year was we engaged with poets here and in France under British Council funding, where we got poets to respond to this lexicon in depending on the poet, in English, Irish, French or Breton. And we put together a poetry jukebox around that just as an artistic response. So we try to be creative in the use of the archives and making them relevant and engaging, but also recognising that the heritage is still there.
Can I go back to the kind of the challenges that an organization like this would face? Martin and I both live in New York, and we live on opposite sides of town. And in my neighborhood, there's the New York Historical Society, very old, by New York standards, very old organization, which almost went away. And on Martin's side of town, there's the American Irish Historical Society, which almost went away as well, and has some work to do to really assure its survival. I saw that in 1980, the Linen Hall almost lost its independence, was able to revive itself. Can you talk about that part of your history?
Well, I can talk about it a little bit, but unfortunately I'm not that old.
No.
In that I think I was about 10 probably when that whole... I think I was about 10 when that campaign happened, so obviously I can only tell you about the history of it. Yes, at that time a lot of the collections were going to be... The money was running out basically, and the books were going to be taken and given to one of the universities, and there was a big campaign mounted and money was received from various sources which got the show back on the road. But I think it's fair to say I'm in this role 11 years, and right from the day I walked through the door I realised that we had to diversify our income. And that's why we have done amazing projects which some of your listeners can probably take a look at online. If they look up www.dividedsociety.org, or you'll see the links on our website to Extraordinary Women. They're the kind of projects that actually show the collections in a wider sense, and we've engaged with US universities through that. We've engaged through European universities through that as well, because a lot of people worldwide are now studying Irish studies, but they're also studying peace and reconciliation as well. So that collection particularly can lend itself to that. We do try and do a little bit of tourism, although we haven't developed that fully yet. We've got some tours, but we need to do a lot more work on that.
We could talk about that for a second.
Yeah,
Why
sure.
would a New Yorker, our primary audience is North America.
Of course, yeah.
So, why would somebody who finds himself, okay, I'd like to come to Belfast, why would they stop by here? What would they find?
Well, if you come in here and you join one of our tours, I think, you have to probably engage with us before you come, just to make sure we can book you in at a time that suits you. So if you go to our website and send an email or book on through our booking system, you can do that. But the first thing a tour guide will show you in the Linen Hall is they will point to the clock on the wall and say, oh, do you know that clock was made by the clockmakers who made the clocks for the Titanic? And they used to be based along this block of Donegal Square North. And I think even just hearing the words, it was made by the clockmakers who made the clocks for the Titanic, I think there's something quite spooky and special about that at the same time. And then they will take you around the library. They will point out interesting things to you in the library, but they'll tell you about our history as well. And for example, the Linen Hall Library librarian used to be responsible for recording the weather in Belfast. It's amazing the little snippets like that you can do. And I've talked a lot about our political collection, but you will actually see a gallery of political posters that demonstrates, again, all sides of political opinion. And I often think, and I know you're in the middle of an election at the minute, but I think political posters are very interesting when you look at the history of them. Nowadays, I feel our posters are quite boring. It tends to be a party and a face. But if you look at the historic posters, you will see more of a thought process and more of a slogan around what people are campaigning for. So I think people have the opportunity to see, I suppose, different ages of the library. So I'm talking about the clocks for the Titanic. You will also be made aware of the oldest book in the library, which is actually from 1490, and it's an incunable. Mm-hmm. So, and it was by a Mid-Eastern philosopher called Avicenna. And it's all about natural healthcare and things like that, which who would have thought it? When the oldest book in the Lindenhall would have been that. But we do have a strict collecting policy in general, that it's all Irish and local studies in here of whatever kind that takes.
So, as a member of this institution, is this a lending institution? Can people take books out of the place, or is it strictly a research library that you would walk into?
It's not strictly either of those two things. Okay. As a member, you support the Lindenhall because it's a good thing to do. It's what I always say is the primary objective for supporting us. But you can take books out. Obviously, some items are closed access and they're here for consultation and research. But equally, you can book in and come and do research here, and you'll find our library assistants are very, very helpful.
So that 14th century manuscript I can't borrow?
No, you can't borrow.
Borrow and flick through.
Can't even touch it, Mark.
No, very sorry, you can't. You might be allowed to look at it with a member of staff, but you're not going to be able to take it out and borrow it. Sorry.
But besides the books, what I noticed was the incredible range of programs.
Yes, absolutely.
And tours, and there's Mother and Baby Institution, Forgotten Buildings, Italian Conversation.
Yeah. Well, you did
Ulster
say
Scott. I can't read my own notes here.
Ulster Scots writing competition.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. That's one of the things we're very conscious of. We recognise that people come somewhere like this probably to attend events, but that is their introduction to the rest of the library. So you mentioned Ulster Scots writing competition. So for example, that's something we've been running for 3 or 4 years now. And it means that we encourage poetry and prose and new writing. We're keen to do an Irish language one, and we hope to start that in the near future as well. The exhibitions I mentioned earlier on about the Macadam Lexicon yesterday, that was an event as part of the Belfast Festival. Tonight we have an event with the author David Park, and he's just donated his literary archive to the Lindenhall. So it's an event with David Park tonight, and he's one of the foremost authors probably of this century here as well, so that's quite important to get that. And you mentioned the Mother and Baby Homes. Yes, we have the Sunflower Project coming in November with an exhibition about that, and at the same time we're bringing in some banners that have been done by local Seroptimists. And Seroptimists are an international organisation and engaged with the UN as well, and it's about violence against women and girls. So it's trying to bring those kind of things in. And even over the last few months, we did a project on student activism over the last 50, 60 years. And I think what amazed me particularly about that was the foremost issue for a student nowadays is still housing. And I expected that to be different, considering we were looking at about a 50-year span.
Yeah, it's something that seems to be consistent across the island. I was having a conversation earlier with somebody today, my home city of Dublin, and talking about housing problems in Dublin. And I reminded them, actually, in my case, my grandmother, writing to her sister in America, remarks a concern about having to take a back room in a tenement. This is in 1921. Eamon de Valera runs for his first time when he becomes Taoiseach in Ireland. He runs on housing, will build housing. And now we're back to the same place again.
Yeah.
History repeats. And I think, an institution like this gathers all that stuff together and it kind of reminds, of history repeating. But looking at those collections that you have, I think there's a music collection,
Yes.
as I understand as well. How does that fit into the framework? It's obviously not history, but it's culture.
It's history.
Both.
It's history as well. Yeah. So some of the collections we have got Edward Bunting's collection of Irish harp music, and that was collected from the Blind Harpers in the early 1790s. And Mary Ann McCracken, who was a big social reformer within the city, worked with the Linen Hall to actually make sure that Edward Bunting collected that. So we have Edward Bunting manuscripts. We would have some traditional Irish music collections as well. And then we have some more modern ones like Derek Bell's archive from the Chieftains. So again, it's interwoven, it's history and culture together. And I think that's something that the Linen Hall prides itself on. You mentioned our wide selection of classes, and I've talked about Irish language and Ulster Scots. But yes, we do Irish classes, we do Italian classes. We are also aware of a new emerging community in Northern Ireland, which probably wasn't so prominent during the Troubles. But now we have much more diversity in society here. It's good to bring different projects and opportunities there to collect that archive as well.
Just talking about the city, because earlier you remarked on the fact that we're right in the heart of Belfast, and as I understand it, during the Troubles, maybe people weren't living down here, but I think that's shifting. Does that play out favourably from your point of view in an institution, because this is a shared space now and people have more access to it?
I don't know that we have noticed much difference in footfall over the last number of years, because a lot of people now probably moving into the city centre to new apartments and probably working and things during the day as well. So I don't know that it's made that big of a difference, but it's certainly nice to see the city becoming a bit more vibrant, but there's still a bit more redevelopment needs to be done for sure.
Julie, we've been finding out a lot about the Linen Hall. We haven't found out too much about you.
Oh my goodness.
Where are you from? Where did you grow up? What was Belfast like when you were growing up? And let's find your career path that takes you to
my career path's a bit of a varied one. I come from a broadly business background, so I grew up in Larne in County Antrim, which is about 20 miles from Belfast. So I didn't really spend much time in Belfast growing up. But I went to university in Belfast. I went to Queen's University and I studied law. And I suppose Belfast was quite a different place, because I was a student between 1989 and 1993, so just pre-ceasefire. But you know what? Students are students. We still went out, we still enjoyed ourselves. And even though there was, I suppose, more safety issues, I don't know that we thought about them as much as we probably should have, if I'm honest with you. But I studied law, I graduated in law, and then in my wisdom I decided I was going to become a tax accountant, which after 2 years of working and doing professional accountancy exams, I really thought that's really not the career path I want to follow.
We've talked to a couple of lapsed accountants. Irish too.
It's something that actually I think it's always useful to have the background. But I wouldn't have done that my whole life. No, absolutely not. And then I actually worked in a couple of different. I worked in the private sector for a long time, so I did worked in the communications industry, mobiles industry, and property development. But it's because I think I had the skills of the business background with a bit of project management, and then about 15, 16 years ago, I think I just thought, I'm fed up making money for other people. I would rather move into the charitable sector. So I moved into the charity sector in 2008 and actually managed an arts and cultural centre, but also with commercial parts to it, which was the Spectrum Centre on the Shangle Road.
Okay. Is that the Ulster Scots?
No, it was just purely a centre to try and encourage more engagement and when I say arts and culture, I mean it from just theatre, dance, music in general across the board for people, and art and things like that. And then the opportunity came up for the director's job at the Linen Hall, and I thought, where else would I really love to work but the Linen Hall? And I was very fortunate to be appointed director in 2013, so I've been here since 2013. And I think the good thing about this job is I'm also a history geek and a book geek, so it kind of fits in. I've got the commercial background to run the business, but equally I've got the interest in the books and the cultural side of things.
You wake up in a cold sweat, you're in an older building here, the pipe is going to break, the window breaks, the ceiling leaks.
It happens regularly. Yeah, you might be feeling a bit cold in here today. That's because our boiler's broke. So we're actually upstairs as we're talking. We've just had 4 new boilers installed, and the gas engineers are in tomorrow to commission them. So you asked the correct question there. And we have, as you pointed out, it's a listed building. So the sash windows, the last time we got those serviced, it was £18,000 to get the windows serviced. So yeah, it's a bit of a money bucket being in an old listed building as well. Mm-hmm. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next.
So in your geeky history interest, what particular corner do you find yourself probing around, maybe that other members of the public would be less interested? Is there a particular passion?
In the Linden Hall, I'd love to say I poke around corners all the time and look at books and look at elements of history. Unfortunately, I don't get the opportunity to do that in work time. I think within here, it's really fair to say you have a different interest all the time, because somebody just comes to you and says, have you seen this? And as I said, I'm here 11 and a half years. And even now they're bringing me things and I go, no, I haven't seen that. When did that arrive? Or you've new donations. So, for example, we've got a very interesting Irish traveller collection. Mm-hmm. And there's a beady pocket in it. And I don't know whether you're aware of what a beady pocket was. I certainly wasn't. And it's a pocket that traveller women keep with them at all times, and they carry important documents in it. Mm-hmm. But if they meet someone else, they exchange a button or something and they sew it to it. So that's an artefact. So it means that their history is on this beady pocket, which is quite interesting. So, I suppose what I'm trying to illustrate is if I'm looking at history outside of work, I'm probably pretty boring, and I look at things like Tudor history perhaps, or, read around that. Or locally, I would read around maybe 19th century, Irish history, obviously from the famine through to the Home Rule crisis, something like that. But that's me reading outside of work. Inside work, I think just every day there's something new comes up and just of interest.
Yeah. So talk to me about the spaces here. Obviously, we're sitting in the governor's room, which is, just for our listeners, is a beautiful room with glass enclosed bookcases, and we walked up a beautiful curved staircase, wooden staircase, with books all around. But I'm assuming there are other spaces in here that are used for different purposes. So what would those be, and how are those used?
Yeah. Well, basically, as you said, we're in the governor's room, and traditionally this is where the governors or the board of the Linden Hall met. But because we're so old, that's why they're called governors rather than directors of a board. You'll see the receptacle opposite me. It's like a jug on the windowsill. Mm-hmm. It is what the board in the 1780s and 90s used to pass around, and there's little black and white balls inside that. And if there was a black ball within it and a member was proposed, well, that was it. They weren't admitted to the membership of the library. So
blackballed, so to speak.
Yeah, they were blackballed, exactly. Mm-hmm. So this room is also used. It has been used for filming. It's been used by political documentaries, where they would come in and access the political collection and spread it out in the big table we're sitting around at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's been used just generally for filming and interviews. So this particular room is used for a variety of things. Room hires, small board groups come in here and use this as well. Then we've got another area which we call our performance space. So it's not a black box. We would like it to be a black box, but it's not quite a black box. But it's certainly an opportunity for a room that seats about 80 to 90 people. Okay. Within that room, we have book launches, poetry readings, rehearsed readings of plays, political lectures, meetings, public meetings, and it's mini conferences, symposiums. So we use that room for that. There's a lot of space in the library that the public don't see, but a lot of that's back office stuff or archive rooms, which are temperature controlled, humidity controlled, closed access areas, and obviously office areas. So that is all in the background as well. We have a vertical gallery, which we have different exhibitions every month in. But at the centre of that is the political poster exhibition, which I've already mentioned. But at the moment, we have a local artist with his exhibition up at the Sunflower Project here in November. And next year there will be an exhibition by Cara Friend, who are part of the LGBTQ community, and they'll be doing an exhibition around their history. So we just try to pick different things at different times to illustrate the collections, I suppose.
We've, in our day so far in Belfast, we've been so impressed with the dynamism here, the change, the rapid change that's taking place right now. Looking out the window, you can almost sense it. How does the Linen Hall keep up with that change and still play a role in that change, a positive role?
I think really a lot of that responsibility starts with me, and then because it's very clear the Linen Hall needs to be constantly talking to other civic leaders in the city. It needs to engage with our politicians. It needs to engage with all of our groups. And we need to make sure that we are relevant and that we are also doing the right kind of work that engages everyone, really. So I think that's why it's quite important in today's world to be sure that we are both collecting and engaging in the right way.
Is there any initiative that you kind of, a little dream that you have that you could...
Yes, I can share with you that I have a dream at the moment, and I'm doing a feasibility study into looking at Linen Hall 2, which would be a separate building for the housing of the Northern Ireland Political Collection because it's so big. We want to promote accessibility and a world-class research centre, oral history environment and things for that. So that's and the dream is, it's not a reality yet, but we're certainly doing a feasibility study at the minute.
Well, it sounds like it would be an incredible study resource. It sounds like it has the
It would be
potential to be a draw for visitors, and it sounds like a curatorial nightmare.
Yes, probably all of those things. But I think it's a great opportunity as well. And you talked about how do you keep the doors open earlier on. I think it's important for an organisation to develop. When we were formed in the 1780s, the founding members, they met in bars and public houses around the city and carried books around with them to lend to each other. And we were in a couple of different venues before we ended up in the White Linen Hall across the road from where we're now sitting. But I think it's important. Organisations need to develop and evolve to remain relevant and to stay still with people. Otherwise, you do end up becoming stagnant, don't you?
Our next interview is with the Lord Mayor. Is there anything we should tell him? For you?
Give us loads of money.
Okay, well, that's it.
He's been in the library a few times since he became Lord Mayor, so he's quite interested, I think.
Good.
Julie, thanks so much for having us here. It's really a treat. Great to learn about this organization. I'm not sure exactly how it got on my radar. I was kind of looking, probably Google mapping around. So what is that? I know that the history of linen in Belfast, so I wanted to learn more. It's just a really fascinating place. And it plays very much to the kinds of things we're interested in. Martin is a huge history buff, and I have as many books as in this room in my bedroom. So it's a treat, and we want to come back to see Linen Hall 2.
Yep.
We want to see that political collection. Wish you all the best, and look forward to seeing bigger and better things. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So, John, as a book nerd, I can't imagine a much better place for me to while away a couple of hours in the book stacks of the Linen Hall Library. So this was an interesting experience for us because this was the first time that we had actually made 3 podcasts in one day. Fortunately, because of the scale of Belfast, you can move around there quite quickly, and we could do so on foot. So we followed our way on the cobblestone streets and fetched up at the Linen Hall Library, which is just across the street from the magnificent Belfast City Hall in Donegal Square. And so if you're a bookworm, I can't imagine a more interesting place to go, but it's not just about books in the Linen Hall Library. It is a cultural space, a shared space across communities, and it's a very much a welcoming space.
And while we are spending our time here getting lost in Belfast, it was reassuring, Martin, to come out of almost any place and look to the horizon and find our hotel, the Grand Central Hotel in Belfast, one of the tallest buildings. And we'll talk about their rooftop bar a little bit later on. But in the meantime, thanks again to our sponsor, Tourism Ireland, at tourismireland.com. And they have their 2 sister tourism-related sites, Ireland.com, discoverireland.ie, and discovernorthernIreland.com to help you on your next trip to the island of Ireland.
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bowens on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.